to another episode of Jacey's Creek, where I talk about Pacey and Joey as a couple and as individuals, scene by scene, episode by episode, season by season, so that way we can get a real aspect of what it means for Pacey and Joey to be together. And today we are talking about episode number 5, Family Plans, and this came out, I believe, on November. Well, I don't really know because I put the wrong date and it was like the same from last episode. But this episode we were talking about how Joey decides to visit a free clinic to be more sexually responsible. So if you haven't already, make sure to follow my Instagram, that's Witter and Potter, my TikTok, that's Pacey and Joey, and lastly, make sure to follow Jacey's Creek podcast so that way you can get another episode of Pacey and Joey from me every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So without further ado, let's get into this. So the first scene that we have is of Pacey and Joey, obviously, and they are on Pacey's front porch, and Pacey and Joey are sitting there making out with one another. We love it. They're just making out, and I'm like, I love this scene. And Pacey goes, and Joey goes, what's wrong? Why do you stop? And as Pacey's explaining, she starts like unbuttoning his shirt, and Pacey goes, because every afternoon we sit here, we sit out and we make out, and then evidently at some point you stop us and we just go back inside and watch TV for the rest of the afternoon. So today I'm issuing a pre-sandwich strikes, and I'm issuing a confidence. And she begins to kiss him. He stops her and he goes, haven't you ever heard the term no means no? And Joey says, I don't think I ever heard it from you. And Pacey says, well, you're hearing it now. I'm serious. It's time for us to watch some TV. And he gets up and he goes inside, and Joey says, let me get this straight. Your girlfriend offers her lips in the spirit of teenage lust, and you'd rather sit out here and watch True Hollywood story on Danny Burnett for the 4th time. Which always makes me laugh, because I know what she's talking about, because they always like replay it over and over again. And Pacey says, you always get to stop, and I never get to stop it, so today I'm stopping it. And Joey goes, stop it, Pacey. And Pacey said, I just did. And Joey says, you know what I mean. And Pacey says, and you know how I feel. And Joey says, are we having a fight? And Pacey says, not to my best of knowledge. And Joey says, feels like one of those times when you say you're kidding around, but you were really having a fight, Pace. And Pacey says, I assure you, everything is perfectly alright. Which, I love how Joey's just like kind of scared that Pacey and her aren't like doing okay, but it's really because Pacey doesn't want to take advantage of Joey. So I feel like that was a good moment for them too, because I feel like, especially with, I'm not saying like, I'm kind of saying this. So Miss Jacobs took advantage of Pacey in a lot of ways, a lot of ways, and she also took his virginity, and I feel like, because of that, he's always been a lot careful with the girls that he loves. And one person told me this one time, and they were like, well, I feel like Pacey took advantage of Joey when they had sex, like, because she said no and he kept pressuring her. I think this was one of the moments where they were prepared to have sex. They talked about it. It wasn't like Andy and him where they were at the grocery store and they happened to buy condoms and the next night they were having sex. Like, this was a very drawn out process. And right now I feel like Pacey doesn't want to take advantage of Joey because he knows that she's a virgin and that he doesn't want to rush things. I feel like the moment that sex becomes a thing, like, it just kind of goes out of the picture. Like, I'm not saying like, a lot of the times on TV shows, the moment that someone has sex is the moment they break up. And I feel like that's when TV shows make it out like that. And whether that is real life or not, I feel like that's kind of how they're drawing it kind of in. And I feel like that's how Pacey feels. So then we have scene 1 of Joey and the Cape Side High at the cafeteria, and Joey is sitting there at the table when Jen comes up to her, and Joey is in deep thought. And Jen says, "Hey there. Well, looks like we're both robbed on that history test. B- my ass. What did you get?" And Joey says, "I think I stepped the curve." And Jen says, "Well, can I see how that would be irritating. And she goes, "Geez, what's wrong?" And Joey says, "Nothing. Mashed potatoes are cold." And Jen says, "I got you. So it's been one tragedy after another day." And Joey says, "Mashed potatoes are cold, and so am I." And Jen says, "Is this about sex?" And Joey says, "Is it that obvious?" And Jen says, "Not really. It's just that's always it." And Joey says, "I think Pacey's starting to get impatient." And Jen says, "Joey, he loves you and he'll wait." And Joey says, "But Jen, Pacey's not the problem. It's me. I mean, let's face it. The waiting just going on and on and on and on. Even I'm getting impatient. But for some reason, I keep waiting." And Jen says, "Joey, let me ask you a question. Are you sure that you really want to have sex?" And Joey says, "Of course I want to have sex. The real question is, am I ready? Because I don't know how you know. I mean, if everyone just says, that you just know. But what if they just say that and you never really know?" And Jen says, "Joey, I think you feel more ready if you were actually prepared." And Joey asks what she means. And Jen says, "Listen, for girls in New York, a visit to the free clinic to get birth control, safe sex advice, it's a rite of passage. It's getting like a Batman's or, your wedding permit test." And Joey says, "The free clinic?" And Jen says, "Yeah. The truth is, I don't know that anybody ever really knows if they're ready. But you have to be prepared, and if you're not," and Joey says, "You're right." And Jen says, "To be responsible, safe, and grateful." And Joey says, "To womanhood," and she holds up her bottle, and Jen says, "Cheer." I really like this scene because I generally think that it was kind of one of those scenes that we see where Jen and Joey are really close, in a sense, like they are finally having that moment where they just keep talking and they figure it out. But like Joey finally has someone again to talk about this kind of stuff now that she talked about her feelings with Pacey and how that will ruin Dawson. Finally, Jen and her are talking about sex too, and I just really like how Jen is in those moments, those special moments with Joey, and how much Jen really cares for Joey. So then we have the next scene, which is scene 2 of Joey, and she's at the free clinic, and Joey is waiting in on the exam room when the nurse comes in to join her. And the nurse says, "Have a seat. Did you schedule a pre-appearance exam with the doctor?" And Joey says, which I didn't think, a public exam. And I'm like, I don't really think that you can get one until you're like 19 or 20. But I guess that's how it is now. And Joey says, and the nurse says, "Okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I apologize ahead of time if they're a little bit unsettling." And she says, "Are you ready? Are you currently sexually active?" And Joey says, "What do you mean?" And the nurse says, "Are you currently having intercourse?" And Joey says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure. Never mind. No, I'm going to be having intercourse. It's just currently that's why I'm here." And the nurse says, "Are you aware that there's Jen's influence in the son's cases of risk?" And Joey says, and the nurse says, "Are you aware that there's no cure for the sexual transmitted disease, HEI and HPV? And are you aware that while you're on the pill, it offers excellent protection against pregnancy, it does not protect against sexual transmitted disease? And have you had sexual relations in the past? And if so, any instance of unprotected sex?" And Joey says, "No, I'm a virgin 100%. And the nurse says, "Are you currently in the moment's relationship?" And Joey says, so far as I know." And the nurse says, "Is there any reason you don't think your partner is being molested?" And Joey says, oh, no, I was kidding, he's definitely me. And nurse says, Joey, sometimes we know our partner is being malicious. And Joey says, no, he's definitely malicious. And she says, there's no doubt in my mind. And the nurse says, regardless, is the practice safe sex? Now your partner is willing to wear a condom. And Joey says, yes. And the nurse says, Miss Potter, is there any, these aren't really hard questions. What if you became pregnant or consumed an STD? I mean, those are potential consequences of sex. And Joey says, okay. The nurse says, maybe you should know the other side of the coin, Joey. I mean, sex can be wonderful, fun, fulfilling, part of life. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I just want you to approach this in a level of maturity and responsibility. That's all. And Joey says, okay. And the nurse says, so you schedule your pelvic exam for next week. In the meantime, here you go. Condoms and some information about birth control, pregnancy, and other birth control options. And Joey says, yeah. And the nurse says, smile. Which I'm like, I feel like if you're under 18, don't they have to contact your parents to let you know, like, you're on this pill? This is me. Like, maybe just nowadays. So then we have the next scene of Joey, and Bessie's in her room doing laundry, and she says, Joey, would you please tell your stupid boyfriend to stop sneaking his smelly clothes into our laundry? I'm trying to run a business here, and I'm talking to an empty room. I love how she, like, Pacey just puts his laundry in Bessie's basket. That's pretty funny, not gonna lie. And so Bessie, like, begins to put the laundry away when she opens Joey's top drawer and sees a packet of condoms and stuff in it. And she closes the drawer after putting some stuff in when Joey comes in, and she says, what are you doing? And Bessie says, nothing, just laundry. I gotta go. And Joey goes to the drawer and opens it and then looks devastated. That's what Bessie knows. And also, there are a few things I have to say about this. Like, Bessie being, like, a motherly kind of, like, sister. She's the person who always takes care of Joey and all this different kind of stuff. So when she's put it in the laundry away, I feel like Joey, like, you couldn't have figured out another hiding spot. Like, I was watching, I think it was Turning Red, and the girl had something underneath her bed, and the mom found it, and she freaked out, and then she did it again, her mom found it, and she freaked out. I'm like, you couldn't think of any other place to put it in. Like, for me, mine was, like, I remember, like, putting stuff in my sock drawer or in my desk. But then I would put it in my backpack and stuff like that. Like, there was just a lot of places where I would hide my stuff. And I don't know, like, I feel like Joey could have hidden it a lot better. Like, she could have hidden it in, like, a box underneath her bed or something. Like, I don't know, or underneath her pillow. Like, there wasn't any other spot you could do. And so then we have the next scene, which is scene 4 of Joey. And she is in the Potter B&B dining room, and Joey, Bodie, and 3 customers are sitting out at the table, and Bessie says, I'm so glad you're having a nice visit. Did you take Victoria? And Joey says, hey, I got an A on that English test. And Bodie says, oh, good for you, Joe. And Joey says, I was up all night studying at Pacey's. I'm exhausted. And Bessie goes, I'm sure you are. Like, Bessie, no, don't say that. And Joey says, excuse me? And Bessie says, nothing. Pass the potatoes. And Joey says, not until you tell me what that meant. And Bessie says, Bodie, dear, will you pass me the potatoes? And Joey says, you will get the potato once you tell me what you meant, Bess. And Bessie says, you want to know what it meant? Fine. It meant that you were at Pacey's having sex all night, or you started your own mail-and-order birth control business out of your bedroom. And I don't know why they're having this conversation at the dinner table with, like, all the paying customers. Like, that's a little bit awkward. And she's like, Joey said, I knew it. I can't believe you snooped in my room. And Bessie says, it was hard to miss, Joe. You could have had enough in there to fill a warehouse. And I'll tell you what, I'll lock you in there if it was legal because you're not ready to have sex. And Joey says, oh, so now you're playing a misresponsible caretaker. Bessie, you let me spend an entire summer sailing on a boat with Pacey alone. And Bessie said, I didn't let you. You went. What could I have possibly said? And Joey says, nothing. Just like there's nothing that you could say about this. And Bessie says, this is one thing I can say about it, young lady. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. And Joey says, Bessie, for your information, I'm not having sex, okay? But at some point, I probably will, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And Bessie says, you're a 17-year-old girl who doesn't understand the first thing about consequences and responsibility. You are not ready to have sex. And Joey says, I am a 17-year-old girl in Cape Side, Bessie. My whole life is consequences and responsibility, okay? So if you excuse me, I think I'll have my birth control warehouse. I'll go to my birth control warehouse. So I feel like Bessie kind of, I don't think she overreacted at all. I think if Joey went to Bessie, I feel like it would have been also the same reaction right now. Especially if Bessie was a young mom and she knows that if having sex means pregnancy and she doesn't want that for her sister. And I think I heard one time that their mom also was pregnant at a young age with Bessie, and so that's also why Bessie was kind of nervous for Joey to have sex. So it made total sense why Bessie was kind of upset about this. But what doesn't make sense is why Joey would, it does make sense why Joey would hide this because she is a 17-year-old girl, but wouldn't legally she would have to have Bessie in the room in order to get the birth control? The person wouldn't just give her the birth control. I'm gonna look that up right now. I'm gonna look it up on my device. And I'm gonna see, because I take it, and I know that you have to have a guardian. Let's see. Sorry, it's gonna be a little bit quiet, but I want to rehash the moment. And it's just also, in order to, I'm gonna look this up. In order to get birth control, you have to have a parent. Okay, here we go. I searched up, in order to have a birth control, do you have to have a guardian? It will not go through. So, okay, is it just me? This is really random because I'm using Safari right now. It's just me, Safari is really crappy. It never works for me at all. And I don't know why it never works for me, but it's just one of those things where I'm you've got to be kidding me. It's just the spinning wheel of death. So, okay. So, it says, some minors under the age of 18 will be required to accomplish consent from a parent before receiving medical such as birth control, sentence, cancer scanning, or bowel movements at our clinic. So can you get birth control without your parents? Yes, in the state of California, apparently you can get birth control. I just never, that kind of blows my mind. I just did not know that. It was one of those things where I'm can you or can you not? So then we have scene 5 of Joey. And she's outside the Potter B&B later that night, and Joey is sitting on a bench when Bodhi comes over to join her with Alexander in his arms. And I love how Bodhi, gives her the toy, and she just automatically, starts playing with Alexander. But if you see Joey's eyes, it's just, insane. It's kind of funny to me. And Bodhi says, interesting for show earlier, though I'm not sure it's good to repeat business. And Joey says, sometimes I don't get her. It's not like I'm perfect by any means, but there are a lot of kids out there doing stupid things, and I just don't think she lucked with me. And Bodhi says, I say you're right. And Joey says, so why is she being so irritated? Irritated. And Bodhi says, your sister worries about you, Joe. All the time, in fact. She does not want you to end up like her. She wants more for you. You know, you're the one who's supposed to be out of here. She just wants to make sure that happens. And Joey says, I know. I haven't made my decision yet about sex. I mean, I just thought if I got prepared, then I would be ready. And then afterwards, I got really scared. And this morning, I felt like I was ready. And then this afternoon, I wasn't so sure. And Bodhi says, you know, Joe, I can't tell you what to do. No one can. For all I know is if you're not ready to be prepared for sex, then you're probably not ready for sex. And I think Bodhi was right. She wants, like, Bessie wants the best for Joey. But in another sense, I feel like when you think about it, like, there was a point where Bodhi and Bessie had sex, and then the result was in Bodhi's hand right there. And it's just like, I feel like that was the thing that made Bessie have to stay in Cape Side and have a B&B and all this different kind of stuff besides Joey. And I feel like Bessie, like Bodhi said, did not want that for her, and so she wants the best that she can do for Joey. And then we have the last scene. This is kind of like a short episode with Pacey and Joey, because Dawson figures out his mom's pregnant. So there was that, and that's for a whole nother day, because literally season 4 episode 19 will definitely cover that. And so then we have the last scene, and Pacey and Joey are in their living room in Pacey's living room, sitting on the couch, making out with one another again, when Pacey pushes her away, and Pacey says, you know, I think we should probably slow down a notch. And Joey goes, okay. And Pacey says, what? And Joey says, let's turn it down a notch. I mean, if that's what you want, I respect that. And Pacey says, oh, well, thanks. And Joey says, like, she gets up and she says, perhaps you were hoping that I would turn the tables on me. I get paranoid because I'm always the one that's stopping things, and now suddenly you're stopping things, so I need to go further. And maybe, you know, pay a visit to the free clinic and stop on goodies and bring them back here and we can have sex. And Lisa says, wait a minute. Did you actually go to the free clinic and stop on goodies? And Joey says, I can neither confirm nor deny such reports. And Pacey, I love how she says that. And Pacey says, all right, hold on. Joe, I just kind of kid around about the whole thing. All I wanted to do was jumpstart the conversation. And Joey says, I'm actually really glad that I went. So it's, you know, it's fine. And Pacey goes, no, it's really not okay. I don't want you to do anything that you're not ready to do. And Joey says, I know. And Pacey, I get it. Just as long as you realize that you can't turn some typical hormone-filled silly-ass boy and try to manipulate me again, I'm out the door. And Pacey says, Joe, I'm sorry. And Joey says, I know you are, Pacey. Just because we're not having sex. And she, like, sits next to him. Well, there's certain things we can't do. And Pacey goes, what kind of things? And Joey says, I could kiss you. Like, she whispers that in his ear. And Pacey, he crawls over towards her, and he goes, or perhaps I could come over there. And Pacey starts tickling her, and she goes, Pacey, no, Pacey, stop it. And then they're all laughing. And that was one of my favorite parts. But I think there's a whole, I'm going to compare Andy and Joey for a minute. And I apologize to anyone who really likes Andy. However, there was a big moment where it kind of hit me in this episode where I'm like, okay, so Andy was that type of person who always had a plan. She was like, I want to do this, and this when we have sex. And Pacey's like, man, does the guy get pee or something? And she's like, well, I'm losing my virginity. It's a big deal, Pacey. However, Pacey was the one to start that conversation. And I feel like since he started that conversation with Andy, he kind of knew what it was like to have a girl who kind of was not really pressured in a way, but he knew what it was like to be pressured into sex because of tomorrow. And so therefore, I'm not saying Pacey didn't want the sex, but there was a lot of things where he wasn't ready, and he knows what it's like to not be ready. And so he agrees that he doesn't have to do it with Andy, and then he does it with Andy. And so I feel like at that moment, he's scared that now, in this moment in season 4, he's scared that he'll lose Joey if he pressures her in some type of way, because the aftermath of Andy didn't go well, and he's scared the same thing will happen to Joey. And I feel like because Joey is scared that if she doesn't have, not that she doesn't have sex with Pacey, but she's like, am I really ready for this? And she knows that she loves Pacey. She knows that she adores Pacey. She knows that he is the love of her life. So therefore, she knew that this would mean so much to the both of them. So she gets the birth control, she gets everything, and that's where we lead here. Where it's just like, it's not that Pacey was trying to pressure her, and even he says it, like, it's not okay that you felt like you had to, like, go and get birth control. But also in another sense, it kind of proves that they don't really talk about many things. Like, they don't go out their way to talk about how Joey got birth control in the first place. Like, she's always so scared to tell Pacey things, because I feel like it goes back to Dawson. How Dawson, every time that Joey did something without telling him, he would freak out. And there was a lot of things that Joey just did that wasn't really a good girlfriend material. But I feel like she's kind of scared that Pacey will have the same reaction, that Pacey will freak out the moment that he hears that she wants to have sex or have birth control. And I feel like it would have been a better episode if they went to the free clinic together and they had to figure it out. But for the dramatic TV show, they had to make it where Joey went by herself. And this episode kind of revolves around Joey in a sense, because there's only 2 scenes with Pacey and this part. And so I think like Joey is the main character out of Pacey and Joey in this episode. And when Joey is struggling with birth control and all this different kind of stuff, I think she just didn't want to disappoint Pacey, because she didn't want to disappoint herself if something went wrong. So she was trying to give herself the knowledge that she needed. And then like Bodhi said, like, maybe you're not ready. Like, maybe you need to, like, what someone should have told her was, maybe you need to go to Pacey and talk about this, because obviously you're nervous and you're not ready, and it kind of shows. And when she does, it's like their whole relationship kind of comes back at the end. Like, it was awkward, it was stiff for a little bit, but they do both know at the end of the day they have each other. So also in this scene, like kind of leading up to this part of the scene, there's like a little montage of everybody, and Joey is washing dishes with Bessie, and there's no words in this, and Bessie comes behind and takes a dish from her hand and begins to dry it, and they look at each other and smile, and that's how you know the both of them have been forgiven in this. And I really like the way that they approach the subject with birth control. I feel like they could have done better with the guardian thing, though. I feel like, I do want to state, like, I feel like you have to have a guardian in order to get birth control. Not saying, like, you need the permission, because there's many, many, many reasons why you could get birth control. And not just for sex, like for periods, for like cysts, I think that's what it's called, and a few other things. And it's just like, I don't know, there's a lot of different aspects in birth control, and I feel like you don't need their permission, but you need their like knowledge of getting it. Because also they didn't talk about the free clinic is you have to do it in a certain way. Like, you can't just take it randomly. Like, you have to take it 1 week and then you have to like go from there. And they never really gave her that knowledge. They were just kind of scaring her with the STDs and HIVs and all that kind of stuff. It was, yeah. And so that's how I feel about this episode. So, if you like this podcast, please make sure to come back on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. Make sure to review this podcast, give it 5 stars, leave a kind review, And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, that's Jacey's Great Podcast, and leave your thoughts down below. You can put a thumbs up if you like, but please leave your thoughts down below, whatever you're thinking about this episode or a past episode, or even a future episode that you'd like me to mention. And lastly, if you have not already, make sure to follow my Instagram, that's Witter and Potter, my TikTok, that's Pacey and Joey, and again, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, I post every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Do all the things.